So for Section 8, we did have a few questions. Someone asked a question about Section 16. What were the characteristics of the May 15th, 1932 incident? How did coups and assassinations affect the Japanese government? Why did people support them? How did the support help them? And how did Hirohito respond? So in the May 15th, 1932 incident that targeted Prime Minister Inukai Tsuyoshi successfully, he was assassinated in the coup. There were also attacks on a bank, on the Seiyukai Party headquarters, which was the political party of Inukai Tsuyoshi. He was the last of these party prime ministers before World War II. And also the Lord Keeper of the Privy Seal, which is a official that's very high up there and close to the emperor. And what had happened was Inukai Tsuyoshi had attempted to rein in the military. He had refused, for example, to recognize Manchukuo as an independent country. Remember, that was a kind of puppet government that the military had set up after they had seized control of Manchuria from China. So the army did not like him. And strictly speaking, actually, I should say the military, because a lot of the people who took part in this assassination attempt and this incident also included Navy officials. He was actually killed by Navy men. And this incident then basically, led his government to fall, and led to the establishment of a new, more expansionist pro-military government, because it was quite clear that if you messed with the military, as Inukai Tsuyoshi did, you could be killed. And what exacerbated this was that the people of Japan mostly supported the military. I think I gave you some examples of several tens of thousands of people sent in a petition written that they had signed and with their names in blood, asking that the military officers who had killed Inukai Tsuyoshi and these other people be given light sentences. And then there was a group of young men who actually cut off their fingers and sent them to the government and offered to be executed in the place of the soldiers, the military who would kill Inukai Tsuyoshi and these others. And these military officers were given very light sentences. So the lesson was that, if you want to kill a prime minister, nothing that bad will really happen to you, and it will lead to your political goals being realized, right? We have a new, more expansionist pro-military government. And one thing I want to emphasize here was that Hirohito, despite his prime minister, remember the prime minister was responsible ultimately to the emperor, said nothing. Essentially, he just asked for calm, but he did not criticize the people who killed Inukai Tsuyoshi, which seems to me to have been a reasonable thing to do. Criticize the people who kill your prime minister. Hirohito did not do that, and that emboldened the military. We had this question number 17, how did Japan see itself as threatened as seen in the cartoon 1936? That was the evil Mickey cartoon, remember, where Mickey Mouse invaded Japan. And Japan saw itself as being threatened by the West. It saw itself as being under threat and needing to take action for its own defense. Right. So Japan, it's difficult but we have to really get our heads around this. Japan understood its invasion of China, its attack on the United States of Pearl Harbor, as essentially defensive measures. Now, how and why did full-scale war with China break out in 1937? That's question 23. The incident that causes this is called the Marco Polo incident. Basically, in northern China, there is this bridge called the Marco Polo Bridge, and Japanese and Chinese troops were stationed on either side of the bridge. Fighting broke out between the two, and rather than kind of stepping back and saying, "Hey, let's negotiate this," both of them decided they wanted war. The Chinese were tired of being pushed around and said, "It's time for us to fight back." The Japanese thought that they could beat up the Chinese here and force China to recognize Manchuria. I have written on the site as Japanese. I mean, that's technically that's incorrect. Manchuria was an independent state, Manchukuo, but it was really under control of Japan. And Japan wanted China to recognize that Manchuria was an independent state, so then Japan could control it. China could not accept these kinds of goals, and this then led to full-scale war, right? And what will happen is this will lead to the expansion. This war will quickly expand so that Japan will actually invade Shanghai. There's very hard fighting there, but Japan is eventually victorious. And this will go from just being a border incident then on the north of China to what will become increasingly seen as a holy war to spread the imperial way and Japanese benevolence. And there's a kind of foreshadowing here because they will actually go so far. Japanese Air Force planes, or I'm sorry, they don't have a technical Air Force. Japanese military planes will attack the USS Panay, which is it's a American ship in China, flying an American flag, and they attack and sink it anyway. Japan will pay reparations and apologize for this, but it shows that there are people in Japan who would really like to go ahead and fight the Americans too. That brings us to question 24. What were the problematic policies Japan followed? Why did it follow them despite the fact that they were logical? So if you look at the slide marked problematic policies, in 1936, Japan had very unrealistic goals. They wanted to build up Manchuria, strengthen that. They wanted to secure the resources of North China in order to prepare for war with the Soviet Union. So all of that focused on building up the army. However, they also wanted to gain control of the Western Pacific and Southeast Asia, build up a navy that could match the U.S. while keeping peace with the U.S. So that focused on the navy. So basically, Japan wanted to clearly build up both of its services, one that could compete, the army so it could compete with the Soviet Union, the navy so it could compete with the United States. Now, just trying to do one of those things would be very difficult, right? The Soviet Union has a very powerful, large army. The United States has a very large, powerful navy. Japan would be hard-pressed to do one of those things. It's going to try and do both. There's this Army-Navy rivalry where both think that they should be the primary military arm. Both think they should receive all the money, all the attention. And what will happen is the Japanese government, particularly Hirohito, will deal with this by just trying to give them both what they want without picking a clear strategy. Right? For one of these to actually be possible, Japan should have focused on one. But they don't. They try and do both at the same time. And Hirohito, as emperor, was supposed to try and exercise authority to try and force these two branches of service to get along, and he failed to do that completely.